Simon, welcome to the RevAmp podcast show. We're delighted to have you on board here today. And for those people who don't already know you at home, perhaps you could just take a moment to introduce yourself, your name, your role, and a little bit about your company, Claroty.
Thanks, Gideon. Appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be here. Simon Chassar. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of a company called Claroty. Claroty is the leading OT cybersecurity company. We protect everything within the industrial four walls, and ultimately we protect companies from everything from critical infrastructure all the way through to life sciences, automotive, and food and bev organizations. So,
fantastic. And I know from our prior conversation that you guys are going through a really exciting time right now and a really demanding time right now. So perhaps you could help us to really understand some of the key challenges or characteristics that you're facing right now as a CRO.
Yeah, I mean, the OT cybersecurity market is going through a huge growth period, primarily driven by the fact that there's legacy and unfamiliar assets within the industrial environments that are being now connected to the other parts of the network of enterprises, and that's creating an expanded threat landscape. Mm-hmm. But also from what's happening in the market is that malactors are finding ways to now attack these industrial environments, which means that they can exploit more money from shutting down operations. It's slightly more different than lock-in personal data if you can shut down the productions of food, for example. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we're dealing with 100% year-over-year growth pretty much every quarter. And that's a significant different challenge, I think, in terms of qualifying and prioritizing your efforts and focus of the team. So yeah, that's what I'm currently going through. So
I'm going to obviously be devil's advocate today for everybody that's not as familiar with your market as you are. So tell me, what is the consequence of you not prioritizing your efforts in real terms? When you talk about the numbers, what is the impact of you kind of going left versus right?
Yeah, so I mean, when demand's sort of outstripping the supply, and there's not many, I'd say, specialist organizations that can really compete in this space. So we're of only a small handful of companies that can service the demand. Mm-hmm. And if we aren't prioritizing and focusing our sales efficiency in the right way with the right accounts and customers and selling on business value for them, then they're going to go somewhere else. And that's the nature of the hot demand.
And in terms of capacity planning, has that changed in the last 12 months, or is it changing underneath your feet right now?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge I've got is, the cycle in terms of finding a lead, taking them through nurturing cycles, and ultimately getting them into a sales accepted lead so that the salesperson can, start to work and really identify that buyer aligned journey and the problem that the client has. Mm-hmm. Starts a long time ago. So, making sure that we've got the right activities happening at least 9 months prior to create the pipeline is a key activity. But at the same point, trying to find talent for that type of volume of growth is really difficult. So, I have a large volume of open positions that I'm trying to fill, mm-hmm. and that starts to mess with my sales efficiency planning. So if I don't get somebody coming in the right time when I planned it from a cost load perspective, but also the planned efficiency of the quota retirement over the year, then I can miss numbers pretty easily. Obviously, I save on the cost because obviously they're not coming on board. But ultimately, there's an LTV CAC ratio measure, which means that you want at least $2 for every $1 that you're spending. So that's the nature of the game.
And at a board level, what level, above you, margin of error or whatever, are they willing to digest? I think you mentioned a percentage that you factor into your calculations earlier. What was that?
Well, obviously the board don't expect any margin of error, but I mean, ultimately I have to plan for the fact that I'm going to guarantee the board's return, and that means that I work on a 20% right. Variable of margin of error in a way, because if I don't get a salesperson that's starting on the date that I planned the budget when that person should come in, obviously I need to make sure that I've got the right pipeline available for that person to attract the right talent, and making sure that I don't starve the existing salesperson in the region if I'm expanding or right. creating a new market, for example. And therefore, that could be delayed. If it gets delayed by 2 months, I can't find the right talent, for example, then that's almost 20% on the return. So I need to either hire ahead of the curve or attract the talent ahead of the curve to make sure that I minimize the impact of when that person starts, making sure they got the right pipeline cover and yield, and making sure that they go through the ramping process to be fully ramped, so that they can execute on that pipeline. And that's it's a balancing act, but it's also a momentum activity that you've got to keep all the plates spinning at the same time across your channel, your pipe, your marketing teams, your finance teams for the cost, but also the sales performance and efficiency.
Does that mean that you also have to have another, for lack of a better term, plan B running in parallel to offset the risk that you might not get the right person on board at the right timing? Do you have to have two parallel plans for how you're going to reach your number? Or is it, I just need to be all in on plan A, there's no exceptions and there's no other way?
No, there's always a parallel plans to make sure you de-risk as much as possible, and whether that's doubling down on certain partners and channel activities, also driving the enablement. I'm a keen, we're 100% channel focused as a business, which is really good, because our technology, we don't focus on services, but it really drives a high service demand from a profitability point of view for our partners. So they invest in that, which is good. And they also are attracted to invest in their capability to identify, pitch, and position our technology. And I've always worked on a 10x multiplier. So whatever resources I'm holding, I want my channels certified to the exact same quality within my channel ecosystem. So on that 10x multiplier, I at least have got a coverage of people that can execute, on their own, and de-risk the fact that they don't need a high touch support, for example. But that doesn't go into the solution engineers, which is another challenge, because you've got to make sure you've got the right solution engineer cover as well from a ratio perspective. And
with your channel partners and your channels, I once read a report related to this where there was some kind of statistic that you said that you had 5% of your channel partners, which would be peak performers, would need low touch to no touch and would deliver, on the number. You'd have about 15% that had a huge amount of potential, would need that little nudge over the edge. Your support would make all the difference. And then you had the remaining 80% that no matter how much effort you put into it, would give you really low return on investment, or even negative return on investment. Have you experienced anything like that within your worldview?
Yes, apart from the negative. So everything you pointed out is true. So ultimately we focus on the ones where, like I said, that 10x cover would work probably across about, 15 to 20% of my partners that are fully capable to go and pitch, influence, convince, and almost convert on their own as either OEMs white labeling it or tech alliances that take us to market. And therefore that, from a sales touch point of view, is quite low touch. You don't always get the right ASP out of that, because you can't determine the enterprise sales approach, and effectively you're beholden to that partner and how they sell and or how your product is integrated in the sales strategy. And then you step down into the sort of the additional 30 to 40% of partners where they can identify, they can influence, they just can't convince because they don't understand the business value as strong as your own organization. So in that case, you need the enterprise rep to be able to deliver the strong business value message, push it over the line, so to speak. And in most cases, you need a solution architect also to get the technical verification and validation done with the client. So, but that's still a lighter touch than what I'd say is the rest, which are can identify an opportunity. They have an understanding of what it takes to influence, but probably not the right relationship level. Because OT is a different, OT cybersecurity is slightly different at the moment because of the convergence that's going on. We've got two personas, so an OT persona and an IT persona. And those partners sometimes will have a relationship with either one or the other. They won't have both. And in most cases, you need to have relationships on both sides of the fence of OT and IT. Now, in that case, that is slightly higher touch from my sales team. And what we run is straightforward MEDPIC process methodology, where the P doesn't stand for the paper process, it stands for partners. So we would drive the influence, the convince, and business value cycle. And then when we get to the sort of requirement stage, we identify what sort of partner the client's looking for. Mm-hmm. And then we bring a partner in. So that has a lot of high value to our partners, which is why we operate really well. And we've got a really awesome partner community and network. So
fantastic. Now pulling it back to where we were a moment ago, do you actually see any opportunities coming into 2022? I remember having a look into Sales Kickoff 2021 this time last year, looking at Sales Kickoff 2022. I remember, I'll even give you an example. This time last year when I was doing a podcast with Zscaler over in the US, they were all into the details of creating virtual spaces online, and then you would choose your room, and then you go to your room, and your room was personalized with everything in terms of content that you would need to kind of evolve you and inspire you and kind of guide you. Now a lot of people are kind of getting back to some hybrid reality of in-person / remote. What does SKO 2022 look like for your team?
Well, last year it was virtual.
Right.
Global virtual, which was over 5 days. It was actually a pretty awesome event with virtual breakout rooms and everything else. But this year it's full physical, or next year it's full physical. So we expect we've been working really hard on finding the right location, mm-hmm. really identifying the sort of most lenient, I suppose, conditions around COVID into that country. We've got a country. Okay. We've got a location, we've got our agenda locked. We expect to have round about 200 people, which would be pretty great to get everyone together. And I think we're planning on about 90% that will actually go through to actually attend, which is great. And I think we're also looking at that from a demand creation perspective, beyond SCO into events. More physical, because we find that the richness of the lead which comes out of a physical is far greater than a virtual. But that means that in some countries, especially in Asia, where there's still restrictions on volumes of people gathering, we've got to do more roundtable type activities versus the larger webinar or more conference style events in some of the Western countries. But it's a challenge on the marketing team, and ultimately how they're focused on making sure we build the right quality coming in terms of our relationships. So we'll see. I mean, it's a strange world still. We're getting back to normal as much as possible, but there is still certain areas of restrictions. There's also certain cultural dynamics which makes it difficult for people that aren't vaccinated. And I think that we're going to have to live with that for at least a couple of years yet.
The good news is that you have a plan. It's evolved, and it looks like everything's going to happen. Kind of my last question is all again related to this subject and this theme is with RAMP and onboarding being a big part of the second part, finding the talent, of course, and recruiting the right people or headhunting the right people is kind of part one. But part two is then getting them up to speed effectively. Have you found for yourself or created any efficiencies on that side of things that maybe you're able to do things more streamlined than you were? Because you've not been with Claroty forever, right? You've been with them for less than 2 years, just a year. Yeah. So this time last year, you were probably kind of receiving the existing processes that you inherited, and now this time around, you probably are able to analyze some of the data and see where you can make some improvements. Have you come across anything that you think would be valuable to share?
Yes. So obviously, over a year ago, I was the Chief Revenue Officer for NTT's cybersecurity business globally. And that was a very heavily services-led organization with security control partners as part of the overall solution for our customers. But we still focused very heavily on enablement and education. Mm-hmm. And you have to do that across a broad spectrum of IT security controls in that world. So coming into this world, which is a very so a specific OT cybersecurity technology company. The enablement and education strategy, which I joined in December, was really more of just an e-learning sort of consume on your own sort of format, video format, self-learning. And what I've been involved into, first thing, I hired someone that I've worked with in the past who is just a genius, and she helped build the sort of VMware sales professional and certified technical professional when we were both living the VMware hypergrowth days in the virtualization journey. And she's done many of the same for other cybersecurity companies. She's come in and she's basically completely relooked at our academy and our enablement, and ultimately how we've made it an interactive certification program and training event for our partners. So it's got a lot more structure. It's a lot more interactive. It's very, very broad. That level of training enablement is key focus for me, because if I can get people operating under the same process, the same methodology, the same consistency, then ultimately I get more predictability. And if I can take that and make that replicatable into my partner ecosystem, as I said before, and have them at the same level, using the same materials, I get even more scale coverage. So that's what we've been focused on. That's what we continue to focus on. And if I talk about a couple of things that a CRO would be really focused on, is focus, which is, what is the market that you're going after? What is the personas, which countries, which verticals? So you know exactly your targets. Motivation, which is critical from a compensation perspective. But there's two motivation points. There's an intrinsic and there's an extrinsic. An extrinsic is how much commission they earn, bonuses, etc. An intrinsic is how much time you put into training them and upskilling and up-leveling them, as well as how they feel about the platform, simplifying it, taking the noise and the challenge out of a sales role. And that intrinsic motivator is also a key component of the Claroty Academy, and making sure that they feel like it's not easy is the wrong word, but it's as simple as it can be. And it's going to take them on a journey of being a better individual, a more interesting individual, which means that they're more attractive to their sales clients and have better discussions with their customers and prospects.
I love that. Was there anything else on the enablement side of things, or those were the key pieces?
The enablements are twofold. One, there's the sort of training around having a sales capability, technical capabilities. There's also expanding capabilities around support services and what our partners can build out of support, and then also now around SOC. So as more and more industrial organizations connect their OT environments into the SOC environments, we've got to train them on how to consume and contextualize the alerts out of the OT. So it's a broad spectrum of training. There's also the additional, which is, as you know, as you sort of scale the company to be a very big company, which is what we're on at the moment, the journey we're on, we're putting into the layers of the organization a really defined CMMI business operational process across the business end to end, which includes platforms and technologies and also processes and procedures. So the onboarding training is a completely separate sort of focus, which is how to use the tools, who do you go to, what's the business steps that need to go through for everything on a client life cycle of how we attract someone, and then how do we sort of nurture them, how do we convert them, how do we then turn them into an adopter and an ambassador, and the business systems, tools and processes and functions that support that. So there's a whole internal onboarding training approach too.
Absolutely. So as we kind of draw things to a close here, what would be the key learning or takeaways, maybe if you look back over the last 12 months, that you'll draw from as we look forward to the next 12 months? Obviously, it has been a lot because a lot was new to you in this particular company. Anything that you can put your finger on?
I would say momentum. The one thing that you've got to keep, because there's so many different levers and dynamics for a revenue officer, whether it's tech alliances, partners, or customers, or sales, or revenue, or marketing, people, everything's sort of in the mix. To maintain the momentum and make sure that all of those things are not left behind. As long as you've got all of those things marching at the same speed, you can always build on that momentum. If you don't have them marching at the same speed, then you've got problems. You're always then dropping in, jumping out, and trying to then sort of like a bee to a honeypot in some way. You're flying around all over the place. Mm-hmm. The more you can get that structure of a momentum that is stable, consistent, then you can start to scale the speed of that momentum. So that would be my sort of takeaway, especially in a hyper-growth market for a chief revenue officer.
Fantastic, Simon. Well, thank you from myself and all of the RevAmp team over here. I'd encourage anybody that has any unfulfilled questions for you to just reach out to you on LinkedIn and maybe drop you a polite line. And of course, we'll link to your profile in the show notes here. And it's been our absolute pleasure to have you on board and learn with you and from you. And more than that, wishing you lots of success this coming year for yourself and the rest of your team.
Thanks, Gideon. It's been a pleasure too. And I suppose goodbye from sunny London at the moment.
Glad to see it. I think they turned on extra streetlights today to give us the halo effect. Perfect. Thank you so much, Simon. Bye for now.
Bye, Gideon. See ya.